In this video, I'm going to help you set up your Nikon Z50ii for bird photography. Now this is a really capable little camera that holds its own against the Nikon Z9 and Z8. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to go through some photo settings, some video settings, and then we'll jump out into the field and put these settings to the test, and I'll show you how well this camera can perform. So let's get into it. Okay, so first things first, let's focus on photo mode. And you want to make sure you're in photo mode by obviously the dial on top of the camera. So what I'm going to do first is go through the I menu and show you just some suggestions and customizations you can do here. So getting into the I menu here, there's three big ticket things I want to focus on here and use a lot for my bird photography, and that is focus mode, autofocus area mode and subject detection, and pre-release capture options. But let's go back to focus mode here. Now, if I go in there, I usually use custom continuous autofocus. That's all I use for my bird photos. Make sure you have that available quick smart on your I menu. Some of the lenses don't allow you to change from autofocus to manual focus, but if you have it on your I menu, you don't have to sweat it. Now, the next one is autofocus area mode and subject detection. This is where you can set, obviously, your focus mode, and you can also set up your subject detection. Now, I just leave it on auto. Processor in this camera is the same as the Z9 and Z8, so it's very, very good at detecting subjects. So auto is really all you need here. So I just keep that there. Also, make sure it's on your I menu so you can quickly switch through any subjects. You could be people, you could be planes and trains, whatever you want, but keep it on there and you will be happy. Now the next one here is pre-release capture options. Now this is pretty cool, but sort of situational. So if you want to see a bird take off from a branch, but you want the entire sequence, pre-release capture allows you to do that. So what happens if you just gently press the shutter button, the camera will start caching images before the bird takes off and after the bird takes off. So what happens when you push the shutter down, you get a few seconds of action before the bird takes off, the actual bird taking off, and then moments after the bird flies away. So you get that entire sequence by just holding down the shutter instead of potentially missing the shot. Pretty good for bird photography, good for action and anything with fast movements or unpredictable movements. So I like it on my I menu here, so I can just jump in if I'm in the right situation or right location, and I can capture that moment, no sweat. So that's the I menu here. Now, if you want to change your I menu, you can go into menu, down to controls, customize I menu, go into that, and let's say if I want to change this one, I just press OK, scroll down to whatever I want, press OK, and that's pretty much it. Now I'm just going to keep that there. So what I'm going to do now, talk about some focus adjustments you can do here. So let's go into that. So that is back into the custom menu settings. I want to go to focus here and jump into that. And if you can look at A3, that is focus tracking with lock on. Now going into that. So what this is if you're tracking a subject and it flies behind a pole or a branch or a tree stump, the camera will lock back onto it straight away. It doesn't matter if there's anything in front of it, it'll still track it very well. So I crank that up to make sure that it snaps back as soon as it can. Quick one, do it. So that's pretty much it. Press OK and you will be happy here. Now let's get back to the controls. Let's set up some custom function buttons, which will help you when you're out 3D tracking and shooting birds on the move. So let's go down to controls here, jump in there and see F2 here, custom controls for shooting. Jump into that. And so you can change any of the buttons on the camera. So what I do is I set function 1, which is the top button on the front, and function 2 here. They're very handy to have, but you do sort of do a little bit of twister with the fingers trying to get everything in with back button focus and everything. But function 1 I have set as 3D tracking. So this is a shortcut button that allows me to lock onto my subject straight away lock onto their eyes and track them. This is very, very handy if your autofocus is drifting a little bit. It sort of refreshes it and allows you to track your subject super easily. With back button focus, pressing this, you'll have a subject that is in focus, locked on and tracked very well. The next one is where you can cycle through your autofocus area. So this means let's say I'm tracking a bird in flight. I'm using the 3D tracking area, autofocus area, but a small bird lands on the fence. I want to switch to a smaller, wide autofocus. I can just do that by pressing this button down here, and it will cycle through all of the area modes I have in the camera. Now, if you want to change these buttons, all you have to do is find the one you want. So see on the icon on the left on the camera, this is the function button 1 up the top. I go to that, I press OK, and then I just scroll down to whatever I want and press OK. Very simple, very easy. Now, the next one I do here is my back button focus. Now, I've changed this button here. This is the AEL or AFL button. So I've changed that to autofocus on here. So when I press it, my autofocus is locked on and ready to go, always on. Pretty much the same as pressing the shutter, the same sort of focus points and everything like that. But I can just leave my shutter button for shooting. And but yeah, highly recommend changing that so that that is your back button focus. And once again, if I want to change it, I go to the button I want to change, press OK, scroll down, press OK, and then that's it. Alright, so that's pretty much it for photo mode. Pretty straightforward, just a few little menu diving things here and customizing buttons just for that quality of life, but I highly recommend setting that up, especially those buttons on the front. It will completely change the way your autofocus game will work, and this camera is fantastic at tracking and locking on. So what I'm going to do now is just jump into some video settings. Very straightforward, very much like photo mode. If you're not a video person, maybe just still have a watch and you might get some ideas and inspiration to jump out and start using video. So what we're going to do now is jump into our menu, go down to custom settings menu once again, down to video, jump into there and go to the custom eye menu. So this is my eye menu here. Now the first one I have here is frame size and frame rate. Now because I'm in Australia, I'm in the PAL format, so I shoot in 25 frames per second. If I want to shoot in slow motion, I'm going to have to shoot in 100 frames per second. If you're in the US, it's 120 frames per second. So because the Z52 doesn't shoot 4K 100 frames per second like the Z9 or Z8, I've been shooting in 1080 at 100 frames per second. Works the same, it's just a smaller size, but still that magnificent image quality and tracking is always there. So if you want to shoot in slow motion, highly recommend shooting in 1080. You'll still get the same beautiful image quality. Now the other things I have on my eye menu here, focus peaking, great for manual focusing. There's sometimes when the autofocus won't play nice, especially if you're down low and there's sort of grass or heat shimmer in the way, it can throw the autofocus out. Happens on my Z9 and Z8. But just manually adjusting the lens can get the shot over the line. Focus peaking helps with that, allows me to see what's in focus and what's not. Another thing is zebra pattern or zebra pattern. This is great for any overexposed areas of your image. Occasionally I do it, but I do shoot a lot of the time with the histogram on, so I know if parts of my image are overexposed or not, but it's handy to have on your eye menu. The next one, obviously like the photo mode, is focus mode. A lot of the time you'll be shooting in autofocus full time. That's what I recommend and only suggest for video. So that's AFF to get into it. Now, like photo mode, there is autofocus area mode with subject detection, exactly the same as photo mode. Jump in there and just adjust it to whatever you're shooting. I keep it in auto, that's fine, covers all bases, and I highly recommend putting your frame size, frame rate, if you want to change between 1080 and 4K, keep that on there so you don't have to rummage through any menus. Focus peaking should always be on there. Zebra pattern, it's up to you if you want it on there, but focus mode and autofocus area mode, subject detection, always handy to have. So now let's change some autofocus settings for video. Now I do that going back into menu, custom settings menu, back to video, and we go down to autofocus speed and autofocus tracking sensitivity, which is G5 and G6 in the menu. So jumping into AF speed, I want it fast, I want it to be snappy and lock on straight away. So I just have faster. No questions asked, I want it locking on straight away. When to apply it? Always. Why is that even on there? I have no idea. But should be fast and should always be fast and should always be on. That's how I have it. I have it in my Z9 and Z8 and it works flawlessly. So press OK and you are back to the menu. Now, autofocus tracking sensitivity. I want this high, I want it sensitive, and I want it to track straight away. So everything with autofocus for video, I have just cranked it up high because, you want to get the shot, you don't want to miss the shot. There are times when, heat shimmer, if you're down low, can affect it, but jump into manual mode and you can get the shot. But look, this is going to give you shots probably 95% of the time. So that's why I just crank it up high, keep it up high, keep it sensitive, and you'll get great results. Once again, if you want that to store in the camera, press OK. Now let's go back into the custom setup menu and let's customize some buttons for video mode. So that's once again in video and custom control. So let's go into there. Now for function button 1, I couldn't think of anything I really needed to be here. 3D tracking is a little bit different from photo to video. In autofocus full time, it just 3D tracks automatically. So I've just sort of left that off. If you can think of something else to add on the front, go right ahead. But for me, I'll just leave it off. On my Z9 and Z8, that is my full frame to crop size switch in the image. So I can shoot full frame and then I can sort of zoom in a bit without losing any image quality. That's sort of how I've set up those cameras, but obviously because this is a crop sensor camera, I don't want to crop in anymore. So I've just left that blank. Function button 2 is the same as photo mode. This allows me to cycle through my autofocus mode here. Very easy, very quick, and the quality of life here without having to rummage through any menus or anything is very, very cool. So I would recommend that on that function 2 button on the front. Another one here is the back button focus, very much like photo mode. The AEL, AFL button I have changed to autofocus on. So when I press it, it's going to focus straight away. Another thing I have done here is with the shutter button. There is a dedicated record button on the top, but I've also changed the shutter button to record movies. Sometimes it's a bit hard to find that little record button, especially if you have gloves on. So I just make that big button the record button as well. So I have two, record buttons on the top here. Very cool. So once again, if you want to change any of these buttons, go into the one you want to change, press OK, scroll down to whatever you want. That's probably not a good example. That's probably one. So just scroll through, press OK, and it will update. If you want it to store in on everything, just press menu, and then that's it. So that's pretty much it. Our photo mode and video mode is all set up and ready to go. Menus are set up, autofocus is set up, function buttons are programmed, batteries are charged. So let's go out into the field and put this camera through its paces. Okay, so I'm just down at the local pond looking to get some wildlife shot here. I can see some water hens here, so I might just go for a little bit of a stroll, see what I can find. Got my camera all set up here, so let's get to it. The lens I'm using today is a Nikon 180-600. It's a full frame lens. It's quite large on this camera, but it gives me I think like a 250 to 900 mil equivalent focal length, which is nuts, without a teleconverter, because it's attached to the Z50ii. Love this lens, one of the best telephoto lenses I've used today. I'm also screen recording the screen when I'm taking photos, so you can see the settings I'm using. And I'll talk through, if I'm using back button focus or 3D tracking or cycling through the autofocus modes with my function buttons on the front. Let's have a look at the settings I'm using here. So first up, I'm shooting in autofocus continuous, and I'm shooting in a burst mode here for continuous high burst mode. As you can see, my autofocus mode is on 3D tracking, and because the box is green, I am pressing my back button focus, or the AEL AFL button, which we have changed previously to autofocus on. So that's my back button, as you can see, as it's green. Subject detection here is set to auto, as you can see the A here. So that's pretty much all the settings I will be using this morning. Some water dragon here. Just a little head poking out, so I'm pressing my 3D tracking button. Okay, so we got a little falcon here. He's got something in his talons here. So I'm shooting at 900 mil. What's he got? He's a bit far away now. All the other birds are chasing him. That's a magpie. All the other birds are after him now. Now there's a duck coming here. I think it is a Pacific black duck, I think. For the settings I'm using here, I'm just shooting in 3D tracking here. And I'm just using my back button focus to lock on to the head. I've just used the little, not the joystick, but the sort of keypad on the back to move my focus point to the top of the screen to focus on the duck's head, and just let the 3D tracking and my back button focus do the rest. That is one good looking duck. There we go. I might just lower the ISO down a little bit. I want him to get in a more of a clearer spot like that. Yeah, clear foreground. Come on, turn around. Turn around. Give me that look. There we go. There's old mate, just for good luck. That's a bit overexposed. Let me drop the ISO down. Because I'm so cropped in, I want to zoom back a little bit and I can't. I want to get more of the scene in it. So again, I'm just using my 3D tracking and my back button focus here just to do the work. Actually, I don't mind that. Look at his face. Look at that face. Incredible. So there you go, the Nikon Z52 for bird photography. Such a great little camera and, you know, holds its own against the Z9 and Z8, even though it is not really in that same sort of class. Really surprising at the quality that does come out of this thing. So if you're on a budget, want to check out a good, you know, very reliable and serviceable camera, this little fella should be on your wish list. So have a look. As usual, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.